Poor people are told to invest in themselves. But what if this advice is designed to keep them poor? Everyone knows the formula. Buy nice clothes for job interviews, take courses to improve your skills, fake it till you make it, act successful to become successful. This sounds logical because we see wealthy people with expensive tastes and assume that's how they got wealthy. But there's something that doesn't quite add up. Why do people who follow this advice most religiously often end up deeper in debt? The aspiration trap works by convincing people without money to spend like people with money. Poor individuals are encouraged to invest in their image, their skills, and their lifestyle as a path to success. Meanwhile, wealthy individuals typically live below their means and invest in assets that generate income. The system creates two completely different financial behaviors while using the same language to describe both. When we say invest in yourself, we mean totally different things depending on your economic position. If this kind of hidden financial manipulation interests you, subscribe to Prof. Jiang Explained and share this video with someone who's been told to fake it till they make it. They need to see how this advice actually works. For poor people, investing in yourself means spending money you don't have on things that signal success. Buy a professional wardrobe, upgrade your car, take expensive courses, join exclusive networking groups, get the latest technology. The message is clear: you need to look successful to become successful. For wealthy people, investing in yourself means spending money you do have on things that generate more money. Buy real estate, start businesses, acquire income-producing assets. The wealthy understand that true investment involves buying things that pay you back. Think about the last time someone told you to invest in yourself. What did they suggest you spend money on? This explains something curious about financial advice. The same phrase gets completely different interpretations depending on who's receiving it. Poor people here spend money to make money and assume this means spending on consumption. Wealthy people here spend money to make money and know this means spending on production. The difference isn't just semantic. It creates fundamentally different financial trajectories. Poor people who follow aspirational spending advice often improve their image while worsening their financial position. Wealthy people who follow investment advice typically maintain modest lifestyles while improving their financial position. But here's where it gets interesting. The aspiration trap doesn't just encourage poor people to spend money they don't have. It actually trains them to think like consumers rather than investors. Consider how personal development is marketed to different economic classes. Poor people are sold courses on confidence, networking, and personal branding. These courses cost money up front and promise future success. Wealthy people typically receive education on market analysis, business strategy, and wealth preservation. This education often pays for itself through improved decision-making. The psychological framework is completely different. Poor people are taught to see themselves as products that need improvement and marketing. Wealthy people are taught to see themselves as decision makers who need better information and systems. This creates what we might call the confidence economy. Poor people are convinced that their lack of success stems from insufficient confidence, networking, or self-presentation. The solution is always to spend money on something that will boost these qualities. Meanwhile, wealthy people understand that success typically stems from having money to invest when opportunities arise. They focus on preserving capital and identifying profitable ventures rather than improving their personal image. The aspiration trap becomes particularly sophisticated in how it handles failure. When poor people spend money on self-improvement and don't achieve the promised results, they're told they didn't invest enough in themselves. They need more courses, better clothes, or a more positive attitude. When wealthy people make investments that don't work out, they analyze what went wrong, adjust their strategy, and try again with the same capital preservation mindset. The system has created a feedback loop where poor people interpret financial failure as personal failure, leading to more aspirational spending. Wealthy people interpret financial failure as strategic failure, leading to better investment decisions. Consider how debt functions within this framework. Poor people are encouraged to use debt for consumption. That signals success. Credit cards for nice clothes, loans for education that may not pay off, financing for cars that depreciate rapidly. The debt is justified as investment in future earning potential. Wealthy people typically use debt for assets that generate income or appreciate in value. Mortgages for rental properties, business loans for profitable enterprises, leverage for investments with positive expected returns. The debt is structured to pay for itself through the asset's performance. Same financial tool, completely different application. Poor people use debt to appear wealthier. Wealthy people use debt to become wealthier. But there's something even more sophisticated happening here. The aspiration trap doesn't just encourage poor people to spend like wealthy people. It actually prevents them from understanding how wealthy people really behave. The wealthy lifestyle that poor people are encouraged to emulate, designer clothes, expensive cars, luxury experiences, is typically not how wealthy people actually live. Most wealthy individuals drive reasonable cars, wear modest clothes, and avoid conspicuous consumption. But the media representation of wealth focuses on the most visible symbols rather than the actual behaviors that create wealth. Poor people are shown images of luxury and told this is what success looks like, while the real strategies of wealth building remain invisible. Do you find yourself spending money to look more successful or spending money to generate more income? This creates what economists might call a signaling trap. Poor people spend money on signals of success, expensive brands, luxury items, status symbols. These purchases consume money without generating returns. Wealthy people spend money on assets that generate income, allowing them to afford genuine luxury later, if they choose. The signaling trap becomes particularly expensive when poor people are encouraged to network in expensive environments, join exclusive clubs, attend high-end events, eat at expensive restaurants. The logic is that you'll meet wealthy people who can help your career. But wealthy people at these events typically didn't get wealthy by spending money on networking. They got wealthy by making profitable investments and running successful businesses. They can afford expensive networking because they have income-generating assets, not because expensive networking made them wealthy. The aspiration trap also extends to education and skill development. Poor people are encouraged to take expensive courses and get costly certifications in the hope of qualifying for better jobs. The education is treated as a product to be purchased. Wealthy people typically view education as information to be applied. They focus on learning skills that can be immediately monetized rather than credentials that might eventually lead to employment. This explains why so many people can complete expensive training programs and still struggle financially. They've been taught to see education as something they buy rather than something they use to create value. The system becomes even more sophisticated when we look at how it handles time. Poor people are encouraged to spend time on activities that improve their image or credentials. Networking events, personal development seminars, skill-building courses, these activities consume time without directly generating income. Wealthy people typically spend time on activities that directly generate income or identify profitable opportunities. They network with potential business partners, not potential employers. They attend events to find deals, not to find jobs. The time allocation reflects a fundamental difference between consumer thinking and investor thinking. Poor people invest time in becoming more employable. Wealthy people invest time in becoming more profitable. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of the aspiration trap is how it reframes financial struggle as personal inadequacy. When poor people follow aspirational advice and remain poor, they're told they need to work harder, be more confident, or invest more in themselves. The possibility that the advice itself is flawed rarely gets examined. Instead, failure is always attributed to insufficient commitment to the aspirational lifestyle. This creates a psychological prison where poor people blame themselves for following advice that was designed to keep them poor. They assume they're doing something wrong rather than questioning whether they're playing the wrong game entirely. The wealthy, meanwhile, understand that building wealth requires fundamentally different strategies than appearing wealthy. They focus on cash flow, asset accumulation, and investment returns rather than image management and credential acquisition. The aspiration trap maintains itself through what we might call success theater. Poor people are shown examples of individuals who supposedly became wealthy through aspirational spending. The entrepreneur who dressed for success, the networker who fake it till you make it approach worked. But these success stories typically omit the crucial details. The entrepreneur probably had family money or business connections that made the difference. The successful networker likely had skills or opportunities that weren't available to most people following the same advice. The system creates an entire industry around selling hope, disguised as strategy. Poor people purchase courses, books, seminars, and coaching programs that promise to teach the secrets of wealth building. These programs typically focus on mindset, confidence, and lifestyle changes rather than specific, actionable investment strategies. Meanwhile, wealthy people typically learn about money through direct experience, family connections, or expensive private advisory services that aren't marketed to the general public. They receive specific, actionable information about markets, investments, and business opportunities. The knowledge gap becomes self-perpetuating. Poor people receive generalized motivational advice that feels useful but doesn't generate wealth. Wealthy people receive specific technical information that directly improves their financial position. Consider how retirement planning is presented to different economic classes. Poor people are taught to save small amounts in 401k plans and hope for compound growth over decades. This advice assumes they can afford to tie up money for long periods and that their employment will remain stable enough to consistently contribute. Wealthy people typically build retirement wealth through business ownership, real estate, and investment portfolios that generate current income. They're not dependent on employer-sponsored plans or hoping for market growth over decades. The retirement strategies reflect a broader pattern. Poor people are taught to sacrifice current consumption for future security. Wealthy people are taught to generate current income from assets, making sacrifice unnecessary. The aspiration trap also manifests in how different groups approach risk. Poor people are taught that investing is risky and they should stick to safe options like savings accounts and government bonds. This keeps their money safe but ensures it never grows meaningfully. Wealthy people are taught that not investing is risky because inflation erodes purchasing power over time. They learn to manage risk through diversification and education rather than avoiding it entirely. Same concept of risk, completely different understanding and application. Poor people avoid risk and remain poor. Wealthy people manage risk and build wealth. The trap extends into career advice as well. Poor people are encouraged to develop skills that make them more valuable employees. Learn new software, get additional certifications, improve their resume. The goal is always to become more attractive to employers. Wealthy people typically focus on developing skills that generate independent income. They learn about markets, customer needs, and business systems. The goal is to become less dependent on employers over time. This career orientation creates different long-term trajectories. Poor people become more sophisticated employees but remain dependent on others for income. Wealthy people become business owners and investors who generate income from their assets. The aspiration trap works because it offers hope while disguising exploitation. Poor people are told they can achieve wealth through consumer behavior, buying the right things, joining the right groups, projecting the right image. But wealthy people achieve wealth through investor behavior, buying income-generating assets, forming profitable partnerships, and focusing on systems that multiply money rather than spend it. The system perpetuates itself because poor people who escape poverty typically do so by abandoning aspirational spending and adopting investor thinking. But by the time they learn this lesson, they're no longer part of the target market for aspirational advice. Meanwhile, each new generation of poor people gets the same advice: invest in yourself through consumption, fake it till you make it, and spend money to make money. The cycle continues because the advice sounds logical, and the alternative, saving money when you barely have enough to survive, sounds impossible. But here's what makes the trap particularly cruel. The same behaviors that keep poor people poor are celebrated as virtuous. Working multiple jobs to afford designer clothes is called hustling. Going into debt for education that may not pay off is called investing in yourself. Spending money on networking events is called building relationships. The behaviors that actually build wealth, living below your means, avoiding consumer debt, focusing on cash flow, are often criticized as being cheap, antisocial, or lacking ambition. The aspiration trap has successfully inverted the perception of smart financial behavior. Poor people are praised for spending money they don't have on things that don't generate income. Wealthy people are sometimes criticized for being frugal with money they do have while focusing on income generation. This inversion happens because the aspiration trap confuses activity with progress. Poor people are always busy with self-improvement activities, courses, networking events, and image management. They appear motivated and ambitious. Wealthy people often appear to do less, but focus their efforts on activities that directly generate returns. The culture celebrates visible effort over invisible results. Poor people get praised for working hard on things that don't build wealth. Wealthy people sometimes get criticized for not working hard on things that do build wealth. Consider how social media reinforces the aspiration trap. Poor people are encouraged to document their journey, share their struggles, and inspire others through their hustle. This creates a feedback loop where the performance of success becomes more important than the achievement of success. Wealthy people typically maintain low profiles on social media and avoid sharing details about their actual wealth-building activities. They understand that real wealth is often built quietly and that advertising your success can attract unwanted attention. The social media aspect of the aspiration trap creates what we might call the documentation dilemma. Poor people spend time documenting their efforts to build wealth rather than actually building wealth. The documentation becomes another form of consumption, consuming time and energy that could be directed toward income generation. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the aspiration trap is how it handles timing. Poor people are taught to spend money now for benefits that might arrive later. Take courses today for better jobs tomorrow. Buy professional clothes now for interviews that might happen eventually. Invest in networking today for opportunities that could emerge in the future. Wealthy people typically require investments to show returns relatively quickly or have clear mechanisms for generating ongoing income. They don't spend money on vague promises of future benefits. This timing difference creates different relationships with uncertainty. Poor people are taught to accept uncertain returns on their investments in themselves. Wealthy people typically demand more certainty or at least clear risk-reward calculations. The aspiration trap also creates what economists might call opportunity cost blindness. Poor people are taught to see the cost of aspirational spending as an investment, but they rarely calculate what else they could have done with that money. For example, the money spent on expensive courses could have been saved and invested in income-producing assets. The money spent on professional clothes could have been used to start a small business. The money spent on networking events could have been invested in learning about profitable market opportunities. Wealthy people typically think in terms of opportunity costs. They ask not just whether something is a good investment, but whether it's the best use of their capital compared to other available options. This opportunity cost thinking leads to fundamentally different decision-making processes. Poor people ask, will this help my career? Wealthy people ask, will this generate better returns than my other options? The aspiration trap maintains itself through what we might call the complexity illusion. Poor people are taught that building wealth is complicated and requires extensive education, networking, and skill development. This creates a market for expensive courses, coaching, and consulting services. Wealthy people typically understand that basic wealth-building principles are relatively simple. Spend less than you earn, invest in assets that generate income, avoid consumer debt. The execution might be challenging, but the concepts are straightforward. The complexity illusion serves the aspiration economy by making simple concepts seem difficult and therefore worth paying for. Poor people buy courses to learn things they could learn for free, while wealthy people focus on implementing basic principles consistently over time. Do you ever wonder why the people selling courses on how to get rich never seem to make their money from the methods they teach? The aspiration trap also exploits what psychologists call the planning fallacy. Poor people consistently underestimate how long it will take for their investments in themselves to pay off, and overestimate how much those investments will actually improve their financial situation. This leads to a pattern of serial disappointment, where people move from one self-improvement strategy to another, always believing the next course or networking opportunity will be the one that finally pays off. Wealthy people typically have more realistic timelines for their investments and more conservative expectations for returns. This allows them to make better long-term decisions and avoid the emotional volatility that comes with unrealistic expectations. The planning fallacy within the aspiration trap creates what we might call hope addiction. Poor people become addicted to the feeling of hope that comes with starting new self-improvement projects, but they never stay with any single approach long enough to see realistic results. This hope addiction prevents them from developing the patience required for genuine wealth building, which typically involves boring, consistent actions over long periods of time rather than exciting new strategies every few months. The aspiration trap ultimately works because it tells poor people what they want to hear, that they can spend their way to wealth, that consumption can lead to prosperity, and that appearing successful is a viable path to becoming successful. But wealthy people understand a different truth, that building wealth requires producing more than you consume, generating income from assets rather than labor, and focusing on substance rather than appearance. The system perpetuates itself because poor people who follow aspirational advice and fail assume they didn't try hard enough or invest enough in themselves. They rarely question whether the advice itself is designed to benefit someone else. Meanwhile, the people selling the aspirational advice, the course creators, coaches, and motivational speakers, typically do get wealthy, but from selling advice rather than following it, they understand that there's more money in selling hope than in actually helping people build wealth. And perhaps most remarkably, the aspiration trap has convinced poor people that their financial struggles are evidence of insufficient ambition rather than misguided strategy. They blame themselves for not wanting success badly enough rather than questioning whether they're playing a game they can't win. Can you think of a time when investing in yourself actually cost you money rather than making you money? Hit subscribe if you want to see more analysis of how financial advice serves different purposes for different economic classes, and share this with someone who might be ready to question whether their investment strategy is actually an expense strategy in disguise.